Another year tragedy in Zamfara state as bandits killed district head and 4 villagers in Bungudu local government area in an early morning attack. Well, security operatives responded and rescued 10 abducted victims from their clutches. And tonight we take a look at the national development plan by the Buhari administration, which seems to hold very bright promises for Nigeria. But is this achievable, seeing that we've had numerous plans that failed to meet their objectives in the past? Well, hello and welcome to Politics Today, coming to you live from Channels Television's global headquarters. I'm Kayode Okikiolu here in Lagos. Well, tonight we begin with the state of security in the northwest region, where operatives have rescued 10 kidnapped victims, including a 1-year-old child from Gada community in Bungudu local government area of Zamfara state. Well, it's a cheery twist to a very sad story that began around 3 a.m. this morning when gunmen suspected to be bandits invaded the community and killed the district head, Umaru Allah, and 4 villagers, including his 2 sons. Well, several people were abducted. Well, according to the State Commissioner of Police, Ayuba Elkanah, the police tactical operatives, in collaboration with military and vigilantes, responded promptly and engaged the hoodlums in a gun battle. The joint tactical teams were able to disperse the gunmen and rescue the victims. Well, the commissioner noted that normalcy has been restored in the affected community, with security operatives patrolling the area. But for how long will the people of these areas have to live in fear of bandit attacks? I mean, just 3 months ago, the emir of Bungudu, Hassan Atahiru, was abducted by bandits along the Kaduna-Abuja highway. He spent 32 days in the custody of his abductors before he was released. Well, the governor of neighboring Katsina State, which has also seen its fair share of similar attacks, is proffering solutions to these seemingly unending scourge of banditry, killing, and kidnappings. And he's asking that people be allowed to take up weapons and defend themselves. He was speaking to journalists at the State Government House.
Shi zan ce kowa ya ɗauki makami, akwai makami na addu'a, ita ma addu'a sai an mata shimfiɗa, ba wai kai addu'a ka shiga daga kwanta ba, a'a. Ko za ka shiga daga kwanta kai addu'a ba sai ka rihe kofa ba, ka sa sakata, ka sa komai, sannan kai addu'a ka ce Allah tashe ka lafiya. Ko ka ba kofa ka buɗe ne, gidan ka buɗe, ka ce ai kai addu'a. Ka addu'a ma ba kai mata adalci ba. Ko garinku za a ce ga 'yan banga za a sai musu battery, za a sai musu rain boot, za a sai musu kaza, ana neman kuɗi miliyan 1, kana da miliyan 10 a gidanka ko miliyan 5, sai ka kawo gudunmuwan naira 500 ko naira 1000, kana kai baka da su, sai radda wani naka ko ɗanka ko mataka ko uwarka suka faɗa hannunsu, sai ka kaito da miliyan 2 miliyan 3, kuma ka ba su sai makaman su zo su sake kama sauran danyen gargo kuɗin masu an shi.
Oh, the governor of Katsina State, Aminu Masari, speaking in House, said there. But this is a view that is usually controversial, but then it depends on perspectives and what the law says. But whatever the case, a solution is what the people want as soon as yesterday. But let's take on our big topic for tonight. As you wind down on the year and make plans for next year, 2022, there's a bigger plan you need to be aware of while making your own plans. On this day last week, the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 was formally unveiled, as they say, by President Muhammadu Buhari at the council chambers of the presidential villa in Abuja. Well, it's a national blueprint of sorts, the 5th of its kind since 1960, and it's the successor to the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan 2017 to 2020. But what's in it for Nigerians? Does that plan have your name written on it? Lots of questions, but first let's listen to the Minister of Finance at the launch of that plan, and then we'll dissect this plan for you.
The plan seeks to invest massively in infrastructure, ensure macroeconomic stability, enhance the investment environment, improve on social indicators and living conditions, tackle climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resilience strategies, amongst others.
So that's just a snippet of what that plan holds. Let's further break this down for you. It's a 348 trillion naira plan. And just crunching the figures, doing the math, you'll see that that's 20 times the value of the 2022 budget proposal of 17 trillion naira. Very ambitious indeed. But then what are the broad objectives of this plan? You see, first, to build a strong foundation for a diversified economy with robust MSME growth and a more resilient business environment. Then it talks about investing in critical infrastructure, as well as building a solid framework and enhancing capacities in security and ensuring good governance. Part of the plan is also to enable a vibrant, educated and healthy population, as well as alleviate poverty, promote development across states to minimize regional economic and social disparities. So these are the broad objectives of this National Development Plan 2021 to 2025. But what are the targets, really? Well, take a look at the targets of that particular plan. Just picked out one very vital target, and that is to achieve 21 million full-time jobs for Nigerians, and by extension, lift 35 million Nigerians out of poverty. In terms of funding, well, the funding essentially will come from different areas. The federal government will provide 29 trillion naira, this funding. State governments, 20 trillion naira. But then you see private sector is a big one on this one, meant to provide over 80% of the funding. That's 298.3 trillion naira. And then specifically, the funding sources will come from broader tax base, domestic borrowing, concessional foreign borrowing, public-private partnerships. That's where you see the private sector coming in, as well as that Nigeria Investment and Growth Fund and the Infrastructure Corporation of Nigeria, Infraco. So, I mean, you have a snippet, really. We know how much it's going to cost. We have an idea where the funding should come from. But let's break this even further down. Take a look at the implementation, because, as they say, the devil is in the details. And we're looking at this from the policy angle, the political, economic angle as well. How far can this national development plan take us? Well, let's meet our guests on the program tonight. We're joined by Mr. Sani Yabagi, who's the national chairman of Action Democratic Party, ADP. We also have with us Mr. Anthony Ehilebo, who's the head of new media at the PDP. Both join us from our Abuja studio. And joining us virtually is Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, who is a fiscal policy expert and head tax Africa at PwC. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Just before we get into this, just to say that we're billed to have a representative from the government. In fact, we're meant to have a special advisor to the president on, I think, on finance, Dr. Sarah Alade. She was meant to join us, but we understand that she's in transit. So hopefully some other time we'll get to have representation from the government, yes, the advisor to the president in particular. So let's get into this, gentlemen. And I first want to get a neutral perspective, I hope, from Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. So please break this down for Nigerians. As an economist, does this document have the name of every Nigerian written on it? I mean, will it impact positively on all Nigerians, looking at the details?
Thank you very much, Kayode. I think maybe the starting point is to try and interrogate how we got here and what we've done in the past with some of the plans, particularly the immediate, past plans of Nigeria. And that would be the ARGP as well as the Vision 2020. So these plans are always very good on paper. So the Vision 2020 had the objective of improving the welfare of the people improving the living standard. He had a target of $900 billion GDP and per capita of about $4,000. And Nigeria was meant to be one of the top 20 economies in the world by year 2020. That was last year. Of course, that did not happen, right? So maybe the progress we even made in terms of GDP growth was essentially because of the rebasing of the GDP. And then if you think about the ERGP, which came in maybe just immediately after the recession in 2017, and it was going to be about investing in the Nigerian people, economic recovery, and then building a globally competitive economy. Again, a lot of effort went into it, but we did not exactly accomplish the main objectives significantly. So now we're here with the National Development Plan, 2021 to 2025, and we only just have a few days left for 2021. So technically, we're talking about 4 years from 2022 to 2025. And it's very ambitious. I'm not sure whether I would say that it has the name of every Nigerian printed on it, because if you're going to lift 35 million people out of poverty, we do not know the exact number of people who are in poverty today, but it's clearly more than 35. Even if we assume that nobody gets into poverty between now and 2025, it means that a lot of people will still be left in poverty. But I'll say to a large extent, very ambitious. It seems to have touched the key areas of the economy in terms of sectors, in terms of skills, in terms of technology, policies, competitiveness, and even more importantly, it has this aspect of how do you implement. And I do think that, like you said, the devil is in the details. If we actually follow through diligently and implement, particularly focusing on the areas within our control, I think we'll begin to see some significant improvement in the lives and welfare of Nigerians, and then Nigeria as an economy.
Well, thank you for that opening comment, Mr. Oyedele. We'll get into those, previous plans we've had in Nigeria, a number of them, really, and a lot of them did not meet the set targets as you referenced. But let me just get the opening comments of our other guests. Then we'll dive even deeper. Let me begin with Mr. Ehilebo, because I know that the PDP is no stranger to these plans in general. Talk about the Vision 2020, the 7-point agenda, the big one. There was also the strategy for achieving MDGs, the needs as well. That's the National Economic Empowerment and Development Strategy. So the PDP is no stranger to these plans, and most of them didn't meet the target. But coming from those plans, now seeing the ERGP, seeing the NESP, the Economic Sustainability Plan, and now this one, how does that hit you?
Well, I think first things first is to wish Nigerians compliments of the season. Thank you, Kayode, for having me on your show. It's very interesting that coming off a failed ERGP, we're going for another development plan that looks overtly ambitious and one that is most likely to plunge us into further debt, because a huge part of what we've seen in the breakdown involves borrowing more money. Where we cannot account for the monies that we've borrowed within the last 4 to 5 year tenure of this government. This is a government that set out to, after 2016 with its ERGP plan, which we all at the time had clamored for since 2015 when they came in. We kept saying this government had no focus, it had no direction, it had no agenda for Nigeria. And as if to just assuage all the loud calls, it's put out an ERGP plan, which at the time we thought, okay, these guys have come up with something. But if you take us, I've been over, since I got the call from your producer, I've read through a lot of reports, particularly the one on Premium Times, which sort of lists out the ambitious plans of the three-pronged plan of the ERGP, which is the plan just before this. And I've been going from the commentary I've seen recently. It seems to me that they say they want to put something on the back of the ERGP, which to me was quite a failure. Not one that failed particularly because it wasn't a beautiful plan like this one is, but because it failed because the government itself lacked the will to implement some of the things that it strategically listed out that it wanted to do with the ARGP. The ARGP for me was, and according to what they put in the document, was a plan that hinged itself on three basic tenets, which was one, to create an economic stability program that would stabilize the economy. Was the economy stable from 2016 to today? No. The dollar is still today at 530 naira. So how have you been able to stabilize the monetary aspect of our economy? Let's talk about the physical aspect. If we're talking about its plan to empower Nigerians, as he said, in areas of agriculture, healthcare, and all that, which healthcare can we say that this government has delivered to Nigerians? Are you talking about this insecurity Nigerians have to face if you are going to make investments in agriculture today? I own a farm. I own a farm within the precincts of Abuja, but I've had to abandon my farm because it's close to where the armed bandits are coming from Benin Quarry, from Kaduna State. So how then are you now telling Nigerians that you want to diversify the economy when we are still looking at the monoproduct of oil? If, for instance, the ERGP, the only success it has had for me is that it targeted a 2.4 million barrel per day production, and it's at about 2.2, right? 2.0, 2.2, it hovers slightly around there. And that's because the Niger Delta has particularly kept its own part of the peace and decided that it will not be a restive region and it will allow for the flow of oil. But if we had behaved, or that Niger Delta had behaved like the presidency and those that are within there without keeping the promises they have made to Nigeria, do you think would have had a success, any success in that regard as per the ERGP plan? No, we wouldn't have had that. Let's talk about a government that says it wants to drive an economy. It wants to open up its economy to the rest of the world, as it said in its ARGP, but has shut down Twitter for over 4 or 5 months today. Which foreign investor is going to look at a country that stifles free speech, a country that does not even respect its own judgments from its courts, and you think that they will come and make investments in Nigeria? I'm sorry, we cannot continue to live in a fool's bubble and expect the results that this government is promising us, because it cannot simply deliver on that promise. I'd better wait for a government that will come probably in 2023 to come and salvage Nigeria instead of us living on false wishes and false pretenses that this government puts out as policy documents. It cannot simply fulfill any of the promises it has made to Nigerians. And we must come to terms with that. They are disorganized as a party. They are disorganized as a government. There's nothing, I've seen that document. It's a bogus document as far as I'm concerned. The ARGP has not even lived up. In fact, I can tell you the different indices that were put out in the ARGP that have failed. Apart from...
We'll get to that, Mr. Ehilebo. So we can get the opening
that it promised to bring down to what single digit.
Mr. Ehilebo, if you can hear me, we'll get to some of those nitty-gritties, I mean, relating that to ERGP, but so we can get Mr. Yabagi's opening comments as well. I mean, we have some time on the program to delve into this. So, Mr. Yabagi, would you fault this government really for wanting to lift 35 million people out of poverty, for wanting to create 21 million full-time jobs by this plan?
Well, Kayode, is to me, it's like election campaigns have already started, because we all know where we are coming from as far as the capacity, competence, and the deliverability of such promises that this government had given. And we see where it has landed us. Before, when President Buhari gave his speech, was it in about 2 years ago? He said he was going to get about 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in 10 years. The World Bank statistics came and said that we have put in more Nigerians in poverty. About 12 million Nigerians have put in poverty. Today, we have about almost 70% of Nigerians who are living below the poverty line. So you say you are going to create jobs. Where is the evidence? I mean, by your track record, there's nothing to substantiate that you have the capacity, the competence, and the organization to really deliver. Plans are very easy to make. Everybody can just come out and say, I want to build skyscrapers. I want to ensure that Nigerians, live in paradise, or whatever, you want to call it. But you want to hold the government, especially the government that has been in power, second time running now, and has not delivered anything to Nigerians in terms of insecurity, in terms of productivity, in terms of even the competitiveness of our economy. When you look at the sector that really drives, the revenue that the plan was based on, you look at the governance, in that sector. I'm talking about oil and gas sector. If you cannot manage that sector properly, I don't know how you can imagine to be able to have the revenue and, in fact, even the capacity to be able to deliver, jobs and be able to keep Nigeria safe and be able to attract, investors to this country. You look at what was done to the PIA, which was supposed to be an important piece of legislation that would have taken this country to what they said the next level. But look at what happened. It was a policy somersault. We are expected that transparency, accountability would have been introduced in the oil and gas sector. But what do you have? End of the day, you had government that completely destroyed what you had before as what you can call accountability system. What am I saying? I'm talking about a situation where you have agencies of government supervising oil and gas sector, and you wake up with a bill that says that nobody can supervise that sector. It's only that sector itself that will produce, will market, will report revenue, and no other agency will check what is happening in that sector. What have you done to us? You have made that sector to become more opaque before, that those who are stealing can now steal without, looking, anybody to check them. So yes, we have had plans like, we talked about 2020, the vision to have Nigeria to be among the 20 most developed economies. What has happened? Nothing to really write home about. We have the ERGP. What has happened? They talk about ERGP that will give us, the GDP growth of 7%. What have we had today? It's even difficult to even achieve 2%, growth. So, and the same government is telling you that they are going to give you, all these fancy statistics that will make. That's why I say maybe we're already campaigning. It's like election period is already here already. They are trying to bamboozle Nigerians. They're trying to believe, the same lies they told Nigerians that we are going to improve insecurity, we are going to make your economy to grow, by some fantastic rates. We are going to make you to have jobs and then to be able to live a better life. But that has not happened. Okay. So that is my grudge with this government, that they have no demonstrated capacity or competence or result-oriented organization. There's no good governance, that you can point to. Look at, you started with even giving us, insecurity, situations that by the day is getting worse and worse. So how you ask whether the name of Nigerians are written in this report? None. There's no Nigerian's name that's written in this report in the plan. Because security is basic to every human being. That is number one, a requirement, of every human, needs, that you are secured, your physiological needs is provided for. Yabagi, but that is absent in this government.
Let's move this on now. So that's why
I believe the plan is just something that is used for campaigning.
All right, so let's move this on and take this to Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. I mean, both gentlemen, Mr. Yabagi and Mr. Ehilebo, have picked holes in that national development plan. And time and again, they've referenced the ERGP. I mean, you can even take it back to the beginning of Nigeria as a republic, when we've had the first national development plan, 1962 to 68, up till the third one, the fourth one, and now the fifth one. But particularly the ERGP now. I mean, the ERGP had projections, which Mr. Yabagi referenced. GDP growth was meant to be 7%, but reality as of 2020 was 4%. Inflation rate as a 9.9% was a projection, but it's 15%, 11.23% unemployment target, but what we have is 33.3%, and currently poverty rate at 40%, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS. So that's roughly, about 80 million. But Mr. Oyedele, seeing that both men have picked holes, you serve as our balance, sort of. Why did the ERGP fail? I imagine that the government has taken a look at it. In fact, the finance minister had spoken about, some of the issues they saw in previous plans, and that they tried to, avoid those potholes in this national development plan. So in terms of, learning from the past, would you say that we have learned sufficiently enough with this new plan?
I'll say yes. We have learned, at least if you listen to the finance minister, you can see that the main issues were identified. Not in this new plan, there's a deliberate focus on implementation. So to that extent, we have learned. Whether that will translate into what we do is a different thing altogether. Like they say, policy is not what you say you will do; it is what you actually do that counts. So whether you're looking at restoring growth, even though we can then make excuses and say it was COVID-19, the average growth rate over the past 3 years, up until 2020, and at the ARGP covered, was barely 2%. And if you think about investing in people, whether you're talking about employment, whether you're talking about quality of education, you can just remember how many times we had, industrial actions and ASU here and there. And then you had issues to do with, even healthcare, which is part of human capital and investment in people. But I'll say in terms of, globally competitive economy, we made some progress on the ease of doing business, and I'll give the commendation to the office of particularly the Vice President under the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council. I think it was good progress, although more is still required to be done. Overall, in terms of what lessons have we learned and what can we do differently, I do think that one mistake, and it's very easy to pick holes in any plan, any of the plans we've had in the past. If you want to pick holes, you find many of them. But you can also focus on what is it that can work. One thing I've seen consistently as a problem, or maybe it's the wrong approach from my perspective, is that government is always thinking that we can throw money at problems. So when we had the Vision 2020 plan, it had an investment plan of about 32 trillion naira, and it was allocated again, federal, state, and local government, private sector. ERGP did not exactly quantify any amount of investment, but now we have the NDP that wants us to invest about 350 trillion over the next, it was 5 years, but we now have 4 years left. Now, one thing I found interesting was just looking at the amount of investment expected from the subnational. It's about 20 trillion naira. And I looked at the IGR of all the states. Last year was just barely about 1.3 trillion. The amount they share from federation accounts was about 2.5. Put together, the revenue of the states was even under 4 trillion. And where would you be able to invest that kind of, because if you take 20 trillion divided by 4 years, easily about 5 trillion. And the local government will know that, you barely get anything other than them paying salaries. So there are areas of this plan that I think may be too ambitious, but I think one thing that can help and can work for us is if we focus on the policy environment. Policy is within your control. What you do with ensuring that the port is working, so I don't spend months just importing and months exporting product out of Nigeria. What can we do to ensure that instead of having about 60 different taxes that manufacturers have to pay, we harmonize that to maybe just a few? And instead of dealing with different agencies, we have one agency, and we automate the process for paying taxes, registration, regulatory environment, and address the bureaucracy and impediments that come in the way of success, doing business, and prosperity. I wish that our focus, as a matter of priority, will be on these areas. Because if you fix the policy environment and you enable the people, everything else will fall in place, whether it's
that's vital.
Whether it's diversity.
Pardon me, and that will be vital, really, because looking at the plan, the private sector is meant to contribute almost 300 trillion naira. But, Mr. Oyedele, we have to take a quick break now. And when we return, we'll explore this further, especially the funding aspects. Can the private sector actually bring that to bear? Almost 300 trillion naira. And just to mention that, Dr. Sarah Alade has reached out again. My producer tells me that she's a bit indisposed, and she's promised to join us soonest time possible to give the government side to this one. Dr. Sarah Alade, by the way, is aide to the president on finance and the economy. So we'll go to break and we'll come back at some of the key areas. Still the National Development Plan and the conversation around leadership. Please stay with us. So, still discussing the National Development Plan, NDP 2021 to 2025, and we're finding out just how many Nigerian names are written on that particular plan and how it will impact life within that period. And into 2050, don't forget, there's also the agenda for 2050. And we'll still have with us on the program tonight, Mr. Sani Yabagi, who's the national chairman of the Action Democratic Party, ADP, joining us from Abuja studio. And next to him is Mr. Anthony Ehilebo, the head of new media, head of the PDP, as well as Mr. Oyedele, fiscal policy expert and head Africa tax at the PwC. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. Let me now come to Mr. Ehilebo. I'll come to you, Mr. Oyedele, regarding the financing of all of this, how private sector can play in. But I just wanted to touch base with Mr. Ehilebo, sort of give us a perspective. I know that usually when conversations like this come up, there's always a political angle, and I would like us to see this as a joint work. So with the benefit of hindsight, for your party, the PDP, which has been in power for years in this nation, we've seen the Vision 2020 introduced by the PDP, the needs, strategy for achieving MDGs, 7-point agenda, the transformation agenda, and the rest. So these plans didn't quite meet the objective. So if you could just sort of advise, as it were, what were the challenges with those plans? Why didn't they come to fruition for the PDP administration in the past, such that this government can perhaps learn from the past?
I wouldn't say totally some of those plans did not yield the necessary benefits. If you remember, the needs plan was one that drove the uprising and the upscaling of the middle class in Nigeria. And that bettered strategic policies that drove the rise of the telecom industry in Nigeria. Look, if you were, I'm putting it to me to advise based on what we've experienced in the years of PDP and what we see with this current government. I don't think rolling out a long-term plan that is fabulous and bogus is the way to go. What are the key problems the country suffers today? If you ask me, this government made a critical mistake by not looking at the 2014 confab reports that was placed before it, either out of arrogance or either out of not just concerning itself with what bothers Nigerians. You are looking for 358 trillion from the private sector. Do you think the private sector will invest in a country that has no security, no regard for the rule of law? These are the key essentials that will drive. Yes, it's a beautiful plan. It's a plan, no doubt, that you have a lot of superior minds from a lot of people who are high-flying thinkers, people who will come up with spectacular plans that the government wants to use. Like my brother said, maybe for the coming campaigns. We're already in the campaign season, so they must have developed a document to put out to Nigerians. But that's beyond that. We want to see a Nigeria that works. We want to see an economy that is growing. You can't say you're planning for the digital economy and you're stifling free speech. It's impossible. The policies the government is pushing, either through its legislative framework, does not seem to encourage local investors, does not seem to encourage international investors to put their money in Nigeria. In hindsight, one would have expected that, and as we did, if you try to say we failed, again, let me go back to you saying that the other plans have failed. They didn't woefully fail. As of 2014, Nigeria was the premium #1 destination in Africa for business to invest in Africa. But today, we are nowhere on that list. A conscious effort was made by those plans to put Nigeria on that pedestal. We allowed free speech. We allowed people with investments to grow in Nigeria. We didn't hold back the economy. The monetary and fiscal controls were a little bit much tighter at that point in time. We didn't have galloping inflation. We didn't have unemployment rates soar to at least 40% as we are seeing it today, because we kept those things in check. We're mindful. Don't forget that the economy, again, those that drive the economy matter. The kind of people you put at the helm of affairs, of driving the economy, matters a lot. I keep saying this on national TV. The quality of people we have driving these physical policies affect the policies. These are people who have no idea of what they're doing. They have not done anything similar to it. I want you to take a breather. Look at the finance minister under these programs you're talking about. Where is she today? She's in the World Trade Organization as the DG. Look at the person that was driving our agricultural policy. He's now the president of the FDB, Akiwumi Adesina. That tells you that we were intentional about the people we were putting to manage this affairs. Let me say something. On the last time I was on this show, Professor Patu Tomi was on this show. He helped this government come into power, and they suddenly turned their backs on him. That's one of the best minds we have in Nigeria. How did that happen? So if you want us to have a plan that works, it needs to be an inclusive plan. It needs to be, I mean, we're all laughing at this particular plan because no, I don't think any Nigerian is going to fall behind that plan. But if you want a plan to work, you need Nigerians to fall behind it and believe in that plan and actually even be the ones to invest in this plan. They are talking about government bonds. Who are the people who are going to buy government bonds? They are Nigerians. If Nigerians cannot afford to eat for themselves, cannot afford to give themselves security, you think they will go out and buy your government bonds? That's impossible. So we must begin to face reality and understand that perhaps, I think the last thing someone was saying was delving towards diversification and also restructuring. Because you cannot, I mean, a government that is drawing up a plan for the whole of Nigeria, when are we going to get tired of making that mistake? Nigeria has peculiar nations within itself. Nigeria needs to resolve that these nations need to understand what is good for them, how they can generate this income. A truly federating state would understand that it cannot drive general policy for the whole country. It needs to devolve these powers. Look at our constitution. There are so many things that are on the exclusive list that I would have expected this government to immediately come in and see where these things are strangulating our economy and free up these things. I'll give you a particular instance. Right. Osishomo in Edo State today generates 55 megawatts of power, but the government can only consume 10. That means 40 megawatts of power, 45 megawatts of power is lying waste because they exclusively prevents the state government from generating power for the rest of its people or for its people.
Interesting
These are things that should be looked into. There are so many things that
it's interesting you bring up that point, Mr.
That affect the deployment of a policy.
So let me follow up on the point you made about inclusivity, ensuring that all hands on deck, as they say. Now, this plan, I mean, reading through the plans, I imagine you have at least seen some of it. It talks about having to touch base with all the states in the country, and that would include, of course, states that are governed by PDP. So, what exactly, specifically, before we go to Mr. Yabagi, do you mean by inclusivity? How inclusive do you want this to be?
Well, when we talk about inclusivity, it means the buy-in of the stakeholders, who are the people. Do the stakeholders believe? I mean, the faith in government of the average Nigerian is probably in the negative zone. Not that we even have up to 10% faith in Nigeria. It's probably minus 10 because you do not trust the policies of government. Now, how does government begin to restore faith of the ordinary citizen in its policies? It means stakeholder engagement. It means a buy-in. It means creating a forum where Nigerians can decide the kind of policies that they want if it is favorable to them. Again, it goes back to the restructuring question. It goes back to, not just restructuring doesn't necessarily mean devolution of all the powers the government has. It means the mindset, the thinking. Do we want to control every asset that we have from Abuja? Do we want to plan for a local government, Igwebe local government where I'm from, where you do not even understand the terrain? You look at the federal budget today. The federal budget has so many ludicrous components. Federal government college, where it has no idea, and it keeps putting the same fence year in, year out. Whereas if you devolve some of these things to those guys, allow them to plan for their own economy, then have an inclusive economic plan. That means the South-South region is bringing its economic plan. The Northwest region is bringing its economic plan based on their level of growth, based on the kind of economies they want to, and allow for investors to be able to come into the country and know that they have the apparatus for investing in these things. Have we even looked at our GIS systems in the country?
A moment. So you have made a point, and I'd like us to just follow that trail. So Mr. Yabagi, he thinks that inclusivity really means that all hands should be on deck, and in a way that people have faith in government, as it were. So he's talking about people having faith in government, building faith of the people in them. If this government would get more people on board, as it were? I mean, in the words of Mr. Ehilebo, what does the government need to do? What does the leadership need to do to improve the faith of the people in it?
Well, the government must respect human rights in the first instance. If you want people to have faith in government, we must also ensure that the rule of law is also observed in whatever government is doing. And we must, most importantly, protect democracy, because if you don't allow democracy to thrive, you cannot have the buy-in of the people, because this is a democratic, system of governance that we're operating. And if that system does not have the buy-in of the people, people do not have confidence in that, the results, I mean, the polls will not, votes will not count, then you will find people not being will not internalize the goal of the government. And that's what is happening to the government. That's why I laugh when they say they're expecting about 53 trillion naira from the private sector, to drive the plan. Yes, you need to make this economy to be private sector driven, but not in the way the government is going, because nobody, I don't think any sensible person will come to this economy and invest, at that level, when you know that this government talking to you in 2 years' time will not be there. As a matter of fact, you want continuity. You want to have somebody that you can always, refer to, and then make reference to that. You have this policy, and then now, in 2 years' time, where is this government? And that has been the bane of our development plans. No continuity. The moment you have another administration, they are thinking about something different. My brother here talked about the 2014, confab report. I mean, what is wrong with us continuing with what the previous government is doing? You don't throw away the baby with bathwater. You don't throw away everything, and you say, oh, I'm going to start my own afresh. So that's why we are where we are in this vicious cycle. We should be, very, very nationalistic in what we are doing, axiomatic in whatever we are doing. That is absent in the way the style of governance that we have in this country. Continuity is very important. Respect for rule of law is very important. Respecting human rights is important. Protecting democracy is also very important. Those things are absent, in the way we run our government. PDP is not, I mean, the PDP 16 years too was not anything to write home about, if truth must be told, because the nation was swindled in a manner that, even international community will have to come and then rescue us from what was happening at that point in time. Yes, you may have people that were competent in that government. Competence is very important, and competence has not been demonstrated in this government. That's why we are where we are today. So what is lacking, like I said, is for the government to demonstrate governance, demonstrate that you really have empathy for the people. Listen to what the governor of Katsina State was saying a while ago, playing a victim, that people were not bringing out their money when they say they should bring it. Who has the money, for God's sake? Who should bring out the money? It's not you are the governor of the state, and you are now playing the victim. That in Nigeria, when somebody has been, they are killing your people by the day. So how do you expect Nigerians to have confidence in such a government that does not even empathy? So this is the downside of this government. Yes, the president may have passion, may want to drive this economy, may want to leave a legacy that when he's no longer in the scene, he will be proud of. But where is the drivers? Where are the drivers? I can't see one. This is the problem we are talking about. I always refer to the oil and gas sector. I don't know, Mr. President should take a second look at that PIA, because it's very important. And also, like the issue of this electoral bill, that's why I say you must protect democracy for people to have confidence in your plans, because that's the system of governance that you are running. And if you toy with the electoral amendment bill, the international community will not have confidence in us for them to even bring their money, because they know that there's no continuity. They cannot believe, or they cannot rely, on what the government is telling the people, that you cannot have a system that will deliver, successive governments, in a manner that will people's votes, will count. So
and on that
these are the things
point,
that government must address, because they are fundamental to what we are talking about.
On that continuity point, Mr. Yabagi, let me go to Mr. Oyedele. I mean, they have spoken about their concerns, government ensuring that at least people have more faith in it so they can support government in achieving these plans. And then continuity, from your perspective, really, because looking at that plan, by the way, you see 2021 to 2025, the first thing that hits you is that, well, this government is leaving 2023. So is continuity a major concern for you as well? Or can we find a way to smoothly transition with this plan, regardless of who is in government?
Yeah, I think continuity is a concern, but I wouldn't say that it's peculiar to this administration. In fact, I think that this administration has done better than previous government in terms of inheriting plans and running with them. So even the Vision 2020, and also we've seen a lot of projects that were started by the PDP government, and then they have actually implemented and continue with that. So the concern around continuity is not just this administration. Sometimes you even find the same government would sign a contract and then reverse it the next day, introduce one policy and reverse it the day after tomorrow. So it's a problem with the system. I would say it's a structural problem in terms of continuity, because most times those plans are developed, they're very nicely developed, but the details about which agencies are involved, getting the buy-in of what stakeholders, sometimes is missing. On top of that is the uncertainty that if you have another government and they wish they want to do something different, then they can just completely discard that objective or plan. But we cannot run a country like that, because it will mean that the maximum plan you can have will be 4 years. If you are lucky, it will be 10. For you to have meaningful development, like this government is working on now, the Agenda 2050, you need to have something that is more long-term. Like we've seen in many countries, whether it's China, whether it's the UK, whether it's the US, we need to start working towards that. For that to work, we need to create institutions and structures. Some of those institutions and structures will be by law. Some of them will be by ensuring that we have competent people driving this agenda, and also ensuring that we have a very robust structure for the involvement and engagement of the private sector in government policies. So what we have been saying today now is, the private sector is expected to, contribute investment of close to 300 trillion naira. But then if you think about where would that money come from, you think about the capital market as a major source. And then, effective from 2nd of January, which is just a few days from now, the exemption on corporate bond, tax exemption on corporate bond is going to expire, and it's not being extended. In addition to that, you also have different incentives in the capital market, some of them expiring and not being extended. And the size and depth of that market is very shallow, that it cannot, generate or raise significant capital. The size of the whole market is under $50 billion. Whereas South Africa is over $1 trillion for a smaller economy than Nigeria. So really, we have to ensure that the process for creating institutions, structures, and systems have to be in place, and that can be done by this administration for others to build on it. And then once you have that, even whether you're talking about local investors or foreign investors, I think they will look beyond whether the president will still be there. After all, people invest in Germany and they know that Merkel was going. People invest in China, people invest in the UK. Once they see system and structures, you can win their trust. And based on that, they can start investing, whether they are local or foreign investors.
Okay, Ms. Oyedele, we're winding down now in about 4 minutes or less, but please answer this question about the financing as well. I mean, taking a look at the plan, 348 trillion, private sector almost 300, and then the government about 40-something trillion naira. Part of the funding is regarding borrowing, and Mr. Ehilebo has raised concerns. And this is something that has come up time and again, that, the nation is borrowing too much. Is that a concern for this plan as well, seeing that borrowing also forms, a major, foundation for this?
Yeah, borrowing is a concern, because if you look at the entire plan, government is looking to do deficit budget from now until the year 2024. Only 25 is projected to be a surplus budget, and which means our debt is going to be rising. It's expected to be around 50 trillion in about 2023. That would be a source of concern, particularly because our revenue is very low, and therefore debt service cost to revenue ratio is very high and unsustainable. So which means government has to start moving away from thinking that they can fund development themselves, either through their money generated or through borrowing. We have to empower the private sector. We have over $17 trillion of investable fund around the world, either earning 0%, near zero, or negative returns. Why are they not coming to Nigeria? Because those investors are looking for risk-adjusted returns. It's not enough to have good returns. The risk must be commensurate. We have to de-risk Nigeria to make it more attractive, and we have to be intentional. For example, selling government assets like even NNPC, clean it up and privatize it, and many other assets like that. And also ensure that you are deliberate in attracting headquarters companies into Nigeria, particularly under the African Free Trade Area.
Ms. Oyedele, I'm sorry at this point, I'll need to get the closing comments of our guests in Abuja as well. And let me start with Mr. Yabagi on this one to get your closing comments in just about a minute or so. Your party, the ADP, and by extension, the people of Nigeria, in looking at this plan, I mean, would you be willing to support the government in achieving these plans if some of your concerns are addressed?
Yes, well, of course, we have a stake and we want the government to succeed. But I have not heard the government talking about blocking the leakages, in the oil and gas sector, in other sectors of the economy. Look at the multiple exchange rates that we have. What has government done to address that? You talk about the fiscal policies, monetary policies, everything is just not so clear. And if you don't have a clear-cut policies on these issues, investors will not come. This money you're asking to come, to invest and drive the plan will not be there because nobody would like to bring his money into a porous economy. And our economy today, believe you me, I am calling on the government to take a second look at that PIA because it represents more than 65% of the revenue that this government, the economy, earn, and it's about 80% of the export. It's about 1/3 of the credit, that the banks give. That is an important sector. That PIA is a swindle. Let them take a second look at what they have done. If they really want this economy to perform, so that people stealing our money, we can stop that. Instead of borrowing, we can't go borrowing. We have enough resources in this country.
Well, Mr. Yabagi,
that can run, 100 times what we are trying to do. We're underperforming because people are stealing our money.
Mr. Ehilebo now, and to wind down this conversation. And it's the same question for you, Mr. Ehilebo, the PDP. Would you be willing to support this government on this plan?
Well, Kayode, there's a popular Latin maxim, nemo dat quod non habe. You cannot give what you don't have. This government does not have it to give. I'll give you an example. If you go to Edo State, I was talking about GIS and telling you that the government is ready and open for business. Edo State has power. It cannot even, so much power that it has 45 megawatts captive power. That is power that you need to grow industries. It already is able to give you your CFO in 30 to 40 days. It is providing security lights, street lighting throughout the state. It's providing security for your property. There's a Property Protection Act, which means investors will look at that state and say they want to go there. That's a microcosm of what we expect Nigeria to be. You want to come to Nigeria. Nigeria has more power than it needs for you to be able to build your industry. You want to come to Nigeria and all the streets are powered. You have security. You want to come to Nigeria and when you invest in your property, it is secure.
Mr. Ehilebo,
all these are missing from the Nigerian food mix. And something that perhaps we need to change government in 2023 to experience.
We're totally out of time now. I was expecting to hear maybe yes or no to that question, but it appears that we'll probably try to get that from you another time. But we'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Anthony Ehilebo, who's the head new media at the PDP, as well as Mr. Sani Yabagi, the national chairman of ADP. Thank you, gentlemen. They joined us from Abuja studio, and Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, who joins us via Zoom this evening. Your interventions have been quite vital, gentlemen. Thank you, and compliments of the season. Tonight, everyone, thank you for watching. I'm Kayode Okikiolu, and coming up next is News Track.